The simple frame, if you can just boil it down to healing, is three things. It's unburden
Mhm.
it, purify it, nourish it. It's remarkable, the innate intelligence of the human body. There's nothing in the world, there's no lab test you could take that
Mhm.
will account for the complexity of you. The only thing that can account for that is your own body.
Mhm.
And so let it show off what it is capable of when you just look at those three levers and you uncomplicate the problem.
I am Gloria Grace Rand, founder of the L.O.V.E Method and author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Live, Love, Engage: How to Stop Doubting Yourself and Start Being Yourself. In this podcast, we share practical advice from a spiritual perspective on how to live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically, so you can create a life and business with more impact, influence, and income. Welcome to Live, Love, Engage. Namaste. Ever wonder if those nagging health issues that doctors call chronic could actually be solved by getting to the root cause? Well, today we're going to be diving deep into the fascinating world of true holistic detox, not just another juice cleanse, but a complete reset for your mind, body, and spiritual well-being that can really transform both your health and your business. But first, of course, if this is your first time joining us today, I would love to welcome you to Live, Love, Engage and introduce myself. I am Gloria Grace, founder of Align to Shine Academy, and I empower women over 50 to love themselves and the life they're living. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation that we're about to have with Christian Elliot. He's a certified nutrition coach, personal trainer, life and relationship coach, and co-owner of Healing United, a private membership association that collaborates with doctors and coaches to demonstrate a new model for healthcare. 'Cause Lord knows we need one, at least in the United States anyway. And his primary focus is creating personalized, holistic detox programs to help people overcome diseases that are often considered incurable by conventional medicine. And I'm just really interested in what he has to say today. So without further ado, I'm going to bring him right up to the stage and welcome you, Christian, to Live, Love, Engage.
Well, thank you very much, Grace. It's good to be with you. It's an honor to be here.
Well, I appreciate, and I'm really curious about, I hear a lot of people talking about detoxing and all of this, and there seems to be all sorts of different ways to do it, and I we'll get to that. But first, I'm just kind of curious to know what made you question sort of the conventional approach to detoxification?
We have really started with questioning the word itself and
Mm.
how that word came to be applied to particular things. And so my start was really in getting my own health back. And the epiphany I had was that what helped me heal wasn't anything in what was called conventional. It was the unconventional. It was a chiropractor of all people who really put my health back together when a lot of medical doctors could not. And it just helped me say, what other unconventional things might actually make a big difference for my health or for the health of other people. And it just kind of took a naturally curious mind I have and said, what other ways do we use that word? And maybe we've been either hoodwinked or we've just made some wrong turns, and people tell us things are conventional when they're really not. And so that kind of questioning the medical system, questioning the food production system, questioning what we're told and the mindset or logic of medicine really helped me step back and say, well, shoot, what other ways can I heal? And that became about a 2-year journey that really, it culminated with me feeling way better and going from, I guess you could say, a hobbyist when it came to health to somebody serious about it enough that other people started asking me for what I was doing and how to help them. And so it kind of started in that realm and turned into, at first, a nutrition coaching, and then it became personal training, and then it became holistic wellness because I was so just enamored with capturing as many holistic disciplines as I could. And
Mm.
in doing that, we had brick and mortar locations, and we just eventually transitioned after 9 years of doing that into individual coaching, where we are today.
Wow. May I ask what were some of the symptoms or things that were going on with you that conventional medicine wasn't really helping you with?
Yeah. So my biggest complaint was actually structural. It was a biomechanical problem. So I had
Mm,
had a pressure washing business. So a lot of heavy hoses on wet ladders and
mm,
lifting improperly. It was not knowing what in the world I was doing at a gym, and just trying to get buff to get the ladies. And of course that, you do things in that environment where you kind of overdo it, hurt yourself. So
mm.
between those two things, and then waiting tables for 6 years and
Ah.
always carrying plates on the same side, I had really created a significant degenerative problem in one of my shoulders.
Mm,
And it's such that I felt like I had kind of a butter knife stabbed under my shoulder blade, or like moments where I thought I was going to holding place. Like, I don't know if I can make it. It hurt to snuggle. There was just plenty of
mm.
things that I like, where in the world is this going? And the
Yeah.
medical world just had nothing other than take this anti-inflammatory. That one gives you a cough. Try a different one, and maybe
Mhm,
surgery, but you're too young for cortisone. And it's just this loop of the same
mhm.
non-answers. And I was sick frequently. So about 4 times a year, I would get a cold that knocked me on my back for a couple of weeks. And I'm like, that
Um,
I can't get sick this frequently and function or make progress at life. So it was really those two things that led me to a chiropractor, and he got my structure fixed, but he also helped taught me about nutrition, which, wow,
mm.
food can be very healing if you know how to use it. And so those were the main complaints I had. And as
Okay.
I sorted that out, wow, so much easier.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I'm with you 100%, and I do believe in chiropractors. I've gone to them because when I was a kid in high school, I injured my back. I lived in Michigan, and so we didn't have central AC. We had the window air conditioners, and I was helping my
Uh,
mom take this big heavy thing out of the window for the winter time, and it was, ooh, yeah. So it's not good, but yeah, and I've really become a convert to eating healthy
good for
and
you.
just knowing that, yeah, the food industry is really out to get us, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I wanna stick with talking about detoxing a little bit more first, and then we'll probably get to some of that as well. I'm not sure if I had alluded to this in the intro, but, I know that there's a lot of, like, common myths about
Yeah, yeah.
detoxing. What are some of the ones that you see that are actually really doing a lot of harm to people?
Well, there's a mindset we have to sometimes step back and say, what are we actually trying to detox from? And sometimes we either get that wrong, and we're trying to just deal with the symptoms of toxicity, and we're trying to tidy things rather than do some of the deeper cleaning. And what often gets overlooked, probably the biggest, most overlooked area where detoxification is really needed, is in the realm of microbes, or more specifically parasites. Most of the Western world dismisses that element of toxins. And so if you have let's say a self-replicating, literally procreating source of body burden, a parasite by definition adds no value to the body and only subtracts from it. And so we have something, living organisms in us that will procreate and essentially pollute our body, eat our nutrition, and muck up our insides. And we have a Western medical thinking that says that only happens in the third world. And it's the blind eye toward a very significant and serious problem that creates so many of the downstream symptoms. And so we end up trying to detox other things, but not going after really a set of unbalanced microbes. That could be yeast or fungus or other things. But that the gut and the parasitic problem is much bigger than you might expect. And so sometimes or often the best place to start is to recognize almost definitely you have that as an issue. And then that becomes a, what do I do about it? And how do I kind of wrestle through the emotional landscape of, ugh, I mean, it's emotional to think of the first time you might get rid of a worm. And then after you've done it, you're like, oh, good riddance. And who else wants some of that? And there's an empowerment that comes with it. But we often just, I want to avoid that because that could be uncomfortable. And to be able to look at it and say, well, that's one set of toxins. It's microbes. And then there's the whole chemical toxicity, or
Mm.
even mental emotional toxicity. those are really the three big heavy hitters. And I'll hat tip to, EMFs and blue light and things. Those can be burdensome. But I think if you address the other three, most people only focus on chemical and miss the microbes or the mental toxins that literally poison our biology.
Wow. Okay. So how are we getting these nasty little microbes and parasites in us to be able to then have to detoxify those? How are
Yeah.
those even coming in when, as you say, Western medicine is like, nah, that isn't a problem here in the first world, right?
Yeah, we'd love it to be that way, but it's not. So maybe the shortest way to answer that is to zoom out and look at just nature itself, or we could say the human microbiome. And so nature, just like us, is covered in and filled with microbes. And for the most part, there's a symbiosis to that relationship. But you literally have more microbes in your gut, about 10 times more than you have cells in your body. And recognizing that they're ubiquitous, they are everywhere, and they have a role in nature. Some microbes exist to clean up filth and rot and feces and so on. And those microbes are everywhere, like a carpet all over the earth and inside of everything. And so recognizing that, learning this really helped me jettison the fear of germs, because it's 100% impossible to stay away from them. And what really matters is the balance of the ecosystem. So it's easy to get parasites in you through food, air, and water. Any uncooked meats or produce that you haven't washed, you can get parasites actually in through your feet when you're in contact with the earth and barefoot. So there's innumerable ways they may get in you. They can literally be in your water system, and most municipal systems would have parasites, one of which would be nematodes. And so understanding that, that's a part of it. And if I'm not filtering that, if I'm eating a lot of sushi, if I'm not necessarily getting the best produce, I could be getting this from anywhere. And so it takes some emotional metabolizing to not be fearful of it. And then once you kind of get, this is how it works. My job is to be the gardener tending this ecosystem I have inside me, and to do a regular rhythm of, and for parasites in particular, just purging that so that I don't become more and more infested or create more body burden that I keep reassigning to, it must be other causes besides that.
Okay. Very interesting. Now you also said you were talking about emotional impact as well. So how does that, what do we have to do, I guess, when it comes to like detoxifying our emotions, let's say?
Well, some of it is to recognize what they are and where they come from. So we think of emotional toxicity as there's a difference between a limiting belief and a poisonous belief. A limiting belief is just kind of who knew you could get fish at a steakhouse? Like, since I didn't know that was possible, I limited my options, and I wouldn't choose the steakhouse if you really wanted fish. But when it comes to a poisonous belief, it's this idea of imposter syndrome. It's this idea of inadequacy or unworthiness or lack of purpose. And those beliefs, traumas from our past, identity issues of who we think we are, and shame, those types of, I am not worthy to even belong. Who am I to try? Those types of things, especially with shame and trauma, they literally create this very ugly inner critic in our head. And because of that inner critic, those chemical messengers from a biological perspective tuck themselves into our tissues. And without the replacement of old narratives, without some sort of truthful, hopeful, and life-giving story to replace that, or context, or closure, or forgiveness, those negative thoughts become corrosive literally to our biology, and our thoughts start to create our reality. Once we recognize that is a source of toxicity, and sometimes you have a body that's burdened, and the recognition that it's really hard to heal a broken body if you haven't first healed a broken heart. Sometimes that's the way to healing. And so we actually have a cleanse that starts with the mental, emotional, spiritual aspect of it too, because that is so relevant in trying to get someone to heal. And we look at the whole person, not as individual parts, but as a whole unit. And when you can approach mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and you can kind of triage holistically what might be the problem, or what might be a source of some of this burden, so much easier to figure out how to help someone heal.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I know that's like the big thing that is missing
Mhm.
in our healthcare industry, or well, and
Yeah.
that's probably another
Whatever.
problem when we call it an industry as well. But we're really good at triage. We're really good at fixing bones, but when it comes to more these illnesses like cancer and heart disease and high blood pressure, it seems much more uh, common, or not. That's not the word I want to say, but it makes much more sense to look at what is really driving those, because it seems like it really is much more of an emotional or spiritual issue that is then leading to those types of manifestations.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah.
And if that gets overlooked and we don't recognize the lonely person in front of us, the person with the fragile self-image, we don't recognize that this person just needs a hug. They need some affirmation. They need to feel significance. They need some sort of purpose or feelings of dignity or somebody to
Mhm.
help them make sense of the world. That we operate from a place of fear. And when we operate from fear or from playing small, life just feels cruel and it feels hard, and we miss the opportunities that are in front of us, or we miss the frame that says, I wonder what would happen if I tried, and if it didn't work out, it wouldn't be the end of the world, and
Mm.
maybe I could still have friends if I quote unquote failed at something. And it's
Right.
the fear of what could be that keeps us from trying. But when you recognize where those thoughts hold you back and where something completely irrational still feels true, then you're that close to having a breakthrough in your thinking. And it'll take some humility and curiosity to explore those waters. But you're right, that's what most of medicine, conventional or alternative,
Yeah.
misses. We just don't go there, and we just kind of send people to a shrink or give them a pill to
Yeah.
medicate them, because suffering is to be avoided, and who wants to feel sad? So sadness is the symptom to lead us to find the solution, not to just medicate away.
Yeah, absolutely. Because these the emotions that we have, they serve as guideposts. They're
Mhm.
telling us things, and it's not necessarily because when you just cover it up, it's just going to come back
Right.
later, and it's going to be more severe, frankly, because you didn't deal with it the first time around.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you share an example of maybe where you were working with a client and where specifically like dealing with some of these things that we're talking about here, the emotional and spiritual health, how it transformed someone's physical symptoms?
Oh, countless examples, because I've found sometimes that is the biggest symptom. And so
Mm.
I filter when I ask questions. I typically ask in three different lanes. I'm asking for the biology, the physiological processes, and I'm asking for the contextual puzzle of the number of moving parts of a person's life. But I'm also
Mhm.
asking questions in the psychological realm and the stories or the narrative loops. And so because they're not separate, once I if the other two don't seem to have the biggest layers of challenge and this person's still not well, I'm at the precipice of, okay, now I get surgical with the questions related to what's going on in the narrative framework. And I had one client say to me, man, hope has been so good for my energy levels. Like, we had to shift the frame of how she saw things or what she saw her body as capable of, or the relationship landscape in life, such that it felt approachable, and a biological windfall of energy entered the system because hope did. And sometimes it's I got this pit in my stomach, or I have the weight of the world on my shoulders, or I have this feeling I need to get something off my chest. Those
Mhm.
are those are emotional statements about a physical symptom. And when you can find the story that leads to, when was the first time you felt like that, or how long have you wrestled with that, or what other scenarios in life remind you of that, you start to have this lattice, this framework of where some of these stories have woven into a rule this person has lived by, and the biological freedom, this just weight of the world that leaves them when they realize, wait a minute, that story might not be true. And not just energy that picks up, but so does their mood. So does their
Mm.
willingness to try.
Yeah.
And it started with identifying things that sometimes happen to you, not because of you, or
Mhm.
rules you made up in response to life to get you to where you are. But those rules don't serve you anymore. And the majority of our largest demographic, I guess you could say, is the 60-something-year-old female who's finally looking at those things and saying, I've got to put some of this to bed because it's going to weigh me down into my golden years if I don't get my arms around this.
Oh yeah. Yes. Yes. Still doing that myself. I've dealt with a lot, and
Uh-huh.
yet, in fact, I was talking with a coach today, and it was like, oh man, it's still up there a little bit, and it's like,
Yeah.
but I've come to appreciate I'm just like an onion, and I keep pulling back
Yeah.
layers, and
We all are.
that's yeah.
Yeah. Nobody gets a free pass from struggle in this life.
Uh,
And did we have the space to process it and come to understand it in a healthy way? Or does it still sting every time we think about it?
yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. Um, we talked earlier about, some of the things that are like, in our environment and things like
Mhm.
that. How do you, or what's like the first thing that maybe somebody should do to maybe kind of look at, um, to evaluate what's going on maybe in their environment, maybe, and even, the mental environment as well as the physical environment, to see where they need to maybe start doing some cleaning up.
That's a great question. I think maybe the place to start is depending. It's difficult to answer that in the vacuum of what someone may or may not know. So let's just say we're starting with a fairly unaware person. One of the best places to start that really woke me up was back in 2006. I read a book called _'The Lie. And the lie was that it started in 1906 that we were going to have pure food and pure drugs. And so it's a great investigative journalist look at the slogan, better living through chemistry. And he has a couple dozen myths that we cherish in that book about, we think this one way about this chemical soup that we live in, and it's really not that big of a problem. And the stories we tell ourselves to comfort ourselves. And so maybe that the best answer to your question is as much, you have to learn where this problem is coming from. And if you can zoom out and appreciate just looking at the health statistics that we have as a nation, let's say the US, and in the 1930s, there was about 7.5% of people had a chronic health condition. Today, it's 60%. So that's a magnificent increase. And it's diabolical how awful that is. 6 out of 10 people have at least one chronic health condition. It's deplorable. And or take obesity, for example. It's 42.5% right now, which overweight is about 3/4 of our population. That's coming from somewhere. And to recognize there's not a good explanation for that outside of toxicity. That is the major burden. That's why we've focused on it so much. If we can purify the body of the things that are burdening it, and we can have a framework that is just understanding that and finally being able to articulate that helped me in so many ways, because I can now talk to the person who's feels like they tried everything. They've done the diets, they've done the nutrition, they've been to the specialist, they've tried to biohack themselves, they've been to counseling. Think of it like a dirty fish tank. You can biohack the fish and medicate the fish and tell the fish to swim laps, and you can have the fish go to a counselor and feed it a better diet. But if the water's dirty, the fish can't get healthy. And if we clean the tank, we get the body purified of the things that are burning. Guess how much better nutrition works, or counseling, or biohacking, or whatever you want to do. So that's such a missing element. And so understanding the breadth of the 80,000 plus chemicals, understanding how the microbial world works enough to get your arms around it and say, it doesn't scare me at all to do a parasite cleanse, because I just know how it works. I know I'm not going to be able to avoid it. And so I just have a rhythm of doing that every so often. And once in a while you get a showstopper moment and you go, whoa, that was there. And a lot of the times you go on with your life, but the payoff is how much better you feel. And so the clean water with a nourished body, I'm convinced the body can heal almost anything if you will just take the time to learn it and practice the patience to say there are levers to pull here, but there's not 1,000 variables. You need a few good purifying agents, learn how to fast and how to do it well, then learn what real nutrition is. And we expand nourishment beyond food. It's water, it's hope, it's sleep, it's movement, it's connection with nature and light and sound, et cetera, et cetera. That's where healing is found. And it's so much simpler than biochemical whack-a-mole and a specialist for every body part and another set of lab tests. And you don't need all that. Understand that you're toxic and you can't get away from it. And there's microbes that are in your body, and you have the same liver and kidneys and eyes and legs and everything that every other human has. You're not the only one in the world who doesn't need water or sleep or movement. It's the same path to healing. We just have to be able to figure out how to walk it in our context with our body and our history. And that's just what we do all day, is just personalize that for people.
Right. Yeah. And, and I'm thinking as you're talking, it's like, as a species,
Mhm.
human beings, Homo sapiens. I mean, we've been around for thousands of years,
Mhm.
but it seems like in the last, say, 50 years, it's like we're heading towards extinction by our own activities, the things that we're doing, and I had forgotten that phrase about better living through chemistry. I do remember hearing that when I was
Yeah.
growing up. It's kind of crazy. It sounded lovely, as a lovely catchphrase, but
Mhm.
it seems that we really need to go back to the way we used to be, how we habits that we had, maybe our grandparents or great grandparents did. I mean, I'm thinking of my own family. It was like
Mhm.
my grandmother lived to be 95. She's the only person in my family that has lived to be that old. My mom died at 78. My dad, I think, was 71 or something. My
Mm.
both my brother and sister died, are gone. I'm it, and I'm
Mm.
looking to emulate my grandmother. And I was thinking about this seriously this morning. I was like, why? And I'm like, she didn't really go out to eat much. She
Mm.
cooked a lot of her own food, and when she did go, she went to her church, a Hungarian church that she belonged to, and she would go on Sundays, and they would cook, Hungarian food,
Mhm.
from scratch. And I'm thinking, and she didn't smoke, she didn't really drink excessively, hardly at all. And I'm thinking, there might be something to that compared to how my parents were growing up and things, or my parents were. So, which
Mhm.
leads me to, because you were kind of alluding to that right before I went on this tangent. Um, what would be some like really good daily habits that someone, listening or watching this today could start engaging them that would support, like, this natural detoxification?
Yeah, there's so many. So I'll try to do a rapid fire holistic way to think about that one. So first would be your water. If you don't have pure water, and if you're drinking from the tap, or you don't have at least a 5 micron filter, you're probably getting parasites in your water, and you are poisoning yourself with the pharmaceuticals and plastics and other chlorine and whatever else is in your water. It's such an easy, important, low hanging fruit to get better water. Another thing, if you're just going to pick one or two things in the world of nutrition, it would be take out anything fake from your food. So if you can't recognize it on a label, all those artificial, this, that, and the other, the dyes, hydrogenated oils, et cetera, and vegetable oils. They're also known as seed oils. It's one of the most poisonous, egregious. I would argue it's worse for you than sugar. So yes, reduce or eliminate as much sugar as you added sugar as you can. Fruit has sugar in it, but for the most part, if you can't recognize it, if nature didn't make it, don't eat it. And that's such a simple rule. But two other things I'll highlight. One is movement. It's so often missed. If you want to get your exits open, if you want your body to be able to purge the things that do not belong in you, you have to move. And movement creates movement. If you want to move your bowels, move your body. Get your diaphragm massaging your intestines and get that system flowing again so your fluid circulates, your body can clean itself, and you can get the garbage to the exits. If you're not pooping at least one time a day, I promise you're toxic. The other thing I'd say that highlights something you said about your grandmother is plug into community. If you are not connected to other people, you are leaking purpose. You're leaking passion. There's an ache to belong that is hardwired in the human condition. And if we do not have places to plug into where we feel like our presence is significant, where we feel like someone else's life got better because I showed up today. If you're hungry or thirsty for that, and that's a need or longing that feels unmet, it will be harder on your biology to have the will to do the disciplined hard things or to make the progress that what you want to be about in life. You aspire to this, but I just can't find the will to do it. Go find a way to matter to someone. And whatever movie you're playing in your head of greener pastures and a brighter day, I promise it has other people in the movie. And when it clicks that, oh, this life isn't just about a checklist of doing enough, whatever that means, to make sure I'm good enough, whatever that means. And it really is about contributing. Life gets so much sweeter, and surprise, your health gets so much better.
Mm. Oh, yes. I love it. I love it. Excellent. I agree with all of that 100%. And it's things that I've been doing myself now. So it's, I'm going to ask you one follow-up question because I want to know this personally. So when you mentioned water at the beginning, so if
Mhm.
you do have, because I know where I live, the water from the tap is not great. What do you recommend? Because I know there's like, contraptions you can get that you
Mhm.
can like put in your home to like filter water and things like that. But how would you recommend? Because they sell at the store, spring water or distilled water, all this. So how what would you recommend someone do with the water aspect if they don't have good water out of the tap?
Yeah, there's any tap water, even if it's a well and you know where it's coming from, you can have it tested if you want. But I just assume that we have been on a world that has for so many decades been through this thing called wind and rain, pushing all the chemicals we've created around the entire world. So there's really no pristine water left. There's
Mm,
less toxic and there's more toxic water. But
mm,
so a good filter, so you could do gravity fed. You just want to get, typically it's a good carbon filter. You can get something that at least has a 5 micron filtration threshold where anything smaller than that fits through and everything bigger won't. That will get out even most parasites. But
mm,
there's also fancier multi-stage things where you can have reverse osmosis or distilled water
mm,
as part of it, and they will take out everything in the water, which includes the minerals, which you do need in order for the water to actually hydrate the cell. So most
mm,
units that are good will remineralize the water and they will add minerals back to it. Some even have UV light they'll run through just to mimic the sunshine. And
mm,
then there's a
mm,
whole alkaline or even structured water to talk about on top of that. But to me, sometimes structured water, which is water that runs through nature in its own pathways. And there's a difference between pressurized water in pipes, which if you crystallize that water, typically will have rectangular shapes to it or right angles in it. Whereas water that's flowed naturally, it basically got to play and move around in nature. It has, when you crystallize it, it has a hexagonal framework or lattice to it. And it's that, sounds funny to say, but that energy or that structure that creates a vortex where water can flow and energy properties can go through the water. There's even so many mysterious things about how water can retain memory or it can behave differently in different people. So structured water is water you don't have to digest. It's already digested and formed into structure for you. So it's a deep rabbit hole and you really could spend a lifetime studying just that topic. But you do right by yourself. If you just get a good filter, gravity fed is fine. If you can get one under your sink or on your countertop, the Britas and the lower end ones, they'll get the chlorine out, but they won't get everything else out. And then if you want to get a multi-stage, that would be an upgrade. And if you want to finish with structure, even better.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll do some research afterwards. So we're running out of time, but not yet, because I still want to ask you a couple things. And
Go ahead.
one other thing I want to ask you is, in particular, is what unexpected benefits have your clients discovered maybe during their healing journey that they weren't counting on when they came to you?
Oh my goodness, so many. And what's funny about our testimonies we tend to collect is we're asking because people come to us because their physical body's breaking down in some way, and so we're trying to collect testimonies that talk about how their physical body got better. And they're like, anyway, let me tell you how much better my life is. My relationships are better. My confidence is back. My energy's fantastic, and I just feel more at peace. And my mindset has shifted. And the people that are listening for the testimony of how what XYZ health condition got better, like, anyway, tell me more about that too. So health and weight loss and reduction of pain almost become a side benefit to how much kinder and better life feels. So many intangibles of improved relationships, peace in the home, a marriage that's now working better, ability to dialogue with their previously estranged children, and it's just purpose where they are in work. Life just feels kinder. And many of the identity issues, I feel like an imposter or I'm too fearful to try that thing, those are the showstopper experiences. One client literally wrote me an email at 3 a.m. because he was planning his own suicide and he wanted somebody to more or less talk him off the ledge. He read a blog post I wrote and he's like, this guy sounds reasonable. So he just wrote me one of the most brutally honest emails I've ever received.
Wow.
And now he owns his own farm. He has a grandkid he never would have met. He moved his family and made major life decisions. He used to be on 13 medications and have one of which was a psychiatric med. He had a black toe and oozing sores. And yet the things he wants to highlight are just improvements in the macro picture of life. And yet when they're captured in the context of the whole person and can be addressed. And then you have tactical levers you can pull and incrementally take a wounded warrior and bring them back to life.
Mm.
The transformations are remarkable. And so that's just some of the side benefits people get when they
Mm.
have the humility to say, maybe I'm part of the problem. Maybe the lifestyle I've chosen or the lifestyle I have that created the health symptoms I have, maybe that needs to be on the table for examination too. Maybe I can let somebody poke at me when it comes to the big heavy hitter questions of life and reframe some things. Sure enough, the body responds really well to that when you come to peace with things and when you have a holistic view of where health is really found in the first place.
Mm. How would you counsel someone who, let's say that they have someone in their life
Mhm.
who, they see them suffering, from all these things, but they are someone who is just really convinced that, another pill is gonna solve their issue.
Mhm.
What would you advise that person to do, if they can do anything for their loved one?
Yeah, to me, as a coach, I've learned the power of questions over statements. And
Mm.
so I typically encourage people to start with the question. And so there's a few parameters around using questions rather than offering suggestions or giving advice. So when it comes to, let's say, a stubborn person who they're just going to, in my opinion, blindly follow whatever somebody with MD after their name says. And as a coach, sometimes I see where that's going and it's just painful to watch, but it's their life and they get to choose. So part of the posture that you bring to questions you want to ask people is not being attached to whether or not they take your advice, and it doesn't mean you're aloof and uncaring. It just means they're not going to let you down. They're not going to disappoint you or estrange themselves from you. You will love them no less if they want to choose a different path. But using that posture to go then ask the question, you increase the probability of planting a seed in fertile soil. And so if you can approach somebody who has a health condition and maybe they're choosing something you really just think would be detrimental to them. Hey, I don't know if this would make any sense or would be something worth looking into, but I heard about, have you ever heard of this? And it's that simple frame of presenting yourself as a curious question asker, genuinely looking out for something they may not have heard about, but I figured it couldn't hurt to mention it in case you haven't heard of it or you want to look into it. And somebody told me about it. I'm happy to show you what they told me. If you can have a posture, something like that, you're typically going to get less resistance. And family's always tricky if that's the person you're talking to, because they know you and there's a history. And shoot, even Jesus had trouble getting his siblings to believe he was who he was. So I'm somewhat comforted that if he couldn't win the day, sometimes I'm in good company. But it's patient questions, and it's you pick your moments. And I know an unasked for advice is typically not what people want, but I care about you enough to offer a suggestion. Can I make a suggestion? I just asked a question to get permission to make the suggestion. So the posture you bring to it really has a lot to do with whether or not you get the seed to grow.
Very good. All right. I appreciate that. Thank you. As we're wrapping up, I want to ask you one other question here, which is, because I love to see the responses my guests give. What are you curious about right now?
We don't have that long. So many things. I guess blessed with curiosity by nature. So my professional curiosity, I guess, is as much around finding new ways to communicate how powerfully the body is able to heal. And how can I do that in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming, but feels simple and approachable? I love the challenge of doing that because I'm committed to offering genuine solutions that aren't gimmicks. I could make so much more money if I wanted to peddle a lot of gimmicks, and my conscience just won't let me do that. So I work my tail off to become a teacher and a communicator who sleeps well at night, knowing when I put my name or my voice behind something, I mean it because it makes sense to me and I can explain it. And I feel like this would genuinely help if we could figure out a way to do it. So I stay fascinated by that. And there's the saying in business and health and whatnot that business specifically, riches can be found in niches. And it's very true. The problem with that statement is that health cannot be found in niches. And so I want to, if I can create a niche that is of holistic health, I create a niche of genuine answers that are approachable and transformative. That's the niche I want to have. And so that leads me to circuitous ways of trying to figure out how to explore that. And once we got our crosshairs on detoxification as the major problem almost every health condition has at the center of it, it became easy to genuinely communicate that, because there's no one in the world exempt from that. So I'm fascinated with how to communicate that more and more clearly right now.
Very good. Well, I like that. And is there anything else that I should have asked you about when it comes to detoxing, or anything that I didn't, or any other one last point you want to leave our audience today?
Yeah, I think we covered kind of the basics, and the simple frame, if you can just boil it down to healing, is three things. It's unburden your body. So take away the source of the burden, whether that's mental, emotional, whether that's EMF and blue light, or whether that's microbial or chemical toxicity. Part of your job as the steward of your body is to reduce burden. The other two things are to purify it. And they're doing things that purify your body rarely nourish your body. They're typically two different lanes. And if you've never done a deep detox to clean out the things that have poisoned you, that may be really the linchpin of what you've missed. And all the stuff you've done to nourish your body may work so much better, or would work so much better, if you've done it in that order. Unburden it, purify it, nourish it. It's remarkable, the innate intelligence of the human body. There's nothing in the world, there's no lab test you could take that will account for the complexity of you. The only thing that can account for that is your own body. And so let it show off what it is capable of. When you just look at those three levers and you uncomplicate the problem, life gets so much easier and health gets so much easier. You have a level of vitality that you didn't even know was possible. I recently came across a light therapy that has dramatically improved my sleep. And I didn't think I slept poorly before that. And I'm like, whoa, the depth of sleep I have, the dreams I have, there are theatrical productions at night that are like memorable. Wow. And that was from a simple modality. So there's always more to learn, but health can be that simple. Unburden it, purify it, nourish it, and watch what it'll do.
I love that. And I would say the other thing is to, well, and maybe this comes, I know, yes, this comes into nourishing it, is to do sort of what you're doing, what you're talking about, is to learn, take the time to learn about your body, learn about different ways that you can nourish your body, because there's really great information out there, and which I'm thinking probably one of them is actually to contact you. So if someone listening to this wants to be able to get in touch with you and to learn more from you, what's the best place for people to do that?
Well, yeah, they could go to our website is healingunited.today. So on there, we have a resources section, one of which is my podcast. So I've pontificated about many topics, health and detox related, and I even get into other controversial waters just because I'm trying to deconstruct this thing we call conventional. So that's the name of the podcast, Deconstructing Conventional. So there's a lot people can learn there. And to your point, it really does start with education. But one thing I'd say as a footnote to your comment about education is that there is, as most of your listeners probably know, there's a very intentional movement to control speech and to control what information we receive. And so it's not hyperbole to say, I wish I felt like I was out to left field saying this, but the internet's literally being erased. You got to start going to search engines and you'll find stuff is really hard to find these days. So part of educating yourself is figuring out where the sources of information are, plugging into the newsletters and the podcasts and the teachers that you trust, who seem to be a deep well, and they keep forming concepts that make a ton of sense. If you can find those teachers rather than get distracted by Google searches, because what's in the Google searches just want the powers that be want you to find. Right. And that often means you check out a social media, because a lot of that is just it's mass distraction. Yeah. So that you won't find at healingunited.today. You'll find a podcast that finds some of the best of what I know and can find and puts it together in one place. So people can contact me. I actually have a personal coaching business as well called True Whole Human. People can email me, Christian@TrueWholeHuman, if they want to just get in touch with me that way.
All right. Very good. Well, I appreciate that clarification, because you're true. You're absolutely right. There is so much misinformation and, I guess, disinformation. I don't know if that's the right, or it's missing information. Yeah, I think
it's just It's
now.
a recognition that we
Yeah.
live in a system of well-established monopolists,
Yeah.
which includes how we get our information.
Right.
And when you see that, oh, okay, so if monopolists or Google is telling me this, that truth might be the opposite direction. Once
Mhm.
that penny drops, you start to become a real researcher and investigator.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. I know I've received a lot of benefit from it, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers did as well. So thank you for joining us and spending some time with us today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Grace. It's been great to be here.
Yeah, and I do want to thank all of you as well for being with us today, for listening and for watching wherever you are and whenever you are, I guess I should even say as well. So if you're not subscribed, I hope you will do so now as a result of listening to this, because we always have amazing people on the show who share their brilliance with us. And yeah, and then until next time, I always encourage you to go out and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically.